ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elle inonde. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel, non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Welcome to Sing With Your Feet, the podcast in which we take a few minutes to consider our ideal life and try to look for untrodden paths to help us get there. The podcast in which we take a step back and relish in the gorgeous Venn diagrams that make up our lives, in the hopes that the overlaps there can help us make the less pleasant aspects of our lives more livable. The podcast in which we can laugh at ourselves and our failures and maybe even learn a little oddity or two that will get us thinking that we don't have it so bad after all. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. Now, unfortunately, my magic wand is at the shop, so we're going to be having quite the down-to-earth conversation today. Nah, Lily Fields. Oh, that's you. In my mind, you sound like a Southern belle. You are perfectly adorable. If you have no fairy days to spread about, then why should we even bother listening to you? Well, what I mean is that this week, we're going to be tackling a subject that I do not master at all, and thereby have no magic spell to help us make this topic any easier. If anything, Cinderella, you are the one of us who has the little magic bluebirds and the helpful little mice to attend to your housework with you. But it's in being authentic and honest about my repeated failures in this area that perhaps I might have something to say that's worth listening to.
Now, Lily Fields, must you go on about those Venn diagrams again?
Why, yes, my dear, I must. A Venn diagram in which all the different ideal life themes are the circles, well, it shows just how interconnected each part of our life is. And it's the very best metaphor that I can find for what I want us to be able to do every single day with our ideal life exercise. I want us to be able to see the ways in which our mental health impacts the cleanliness of our home, or how our habits and routines impact our spiritual life. This metaphor of the Venn diagram, it helps us to see how even the smallest, most seemingly insignificant progress in one little circle can impact the way we function in another.
All right, Lily Fields, but there better be a reward for us at the end of all of this.
Well, today there sure is. Today, Layla Kelly, Death Doula, and your wicked stepsister is going to share with us a weird and wonderful burial practice, which is going to make us very glad that the most emotionally charged cleaning that we have to do might be scrubbing our toilet or fishing Legos out of a clogged shower drain. We are in the middle of a series about the ideal life categories. If you'll remember with me, the ideal life exercise is a way to, every single day, 5 to 15 minutes at a time, check our progress towards living our ideal life. In the early days of the podcast, we took time to articulate what our ideal life looked like, and most importantly, the kind of person we would need to be in order to fully live that ideal life. We did this by finishing one simple prompt as many times as we needed to. The prompt went like this: in my ideal life, I am a person who. In examining our answers, we discovered that a certain number of themes, or categories, appeared in our answers over and over again. Our health, our bodies, work, our calendars, our parenting, our marriages, our pastimes. For me, there were 19 of these themes, which I came to see as circles in a big, brilliant Venn diagram that is the blueprint for my life. The ways that the circles of that Venn diagram overlap are unique to me, just as in your life, the ways that they overlap for you are unique to you. This means that for each of us, our blueprint is different, obviously, because each one of us have different talents, passions, and values. In order to check our progress every day, we lift out just one of those circles from the Venn diagram and answer a few questions about it. Here are the questions. Number 1, what is working? Number 2, what isn't working? Number 3, what do I need to think about? And number 4, what do I need to do today? This week, we are talking about one of the areas of greatest struggle for me personally, which is why I hope that you will find some humor and some levity in this week's episode. Our topic is keeping a clean house. Now, if you can, return to your ideal life statements and see if you have any that pertain to the state of cleanliness of your home. Here are a few of mine. In my ideal life, I am a person who has a tidy kitchen, keeps the apartment decluttered, knows the last time the toilet was scrubbed, has clean sheets on her bed, can see out the windows, doesn't mind washing the floor. In my ideal life, I am a person who folds and puts away the laundry immediately. I'm a person who doesn't expect anyone else to be bothered by what bothers me. I only get out what I can use in an hour, and I have a sparkly sink and faucet. Oh, to come round out my unfitness as a wife and a mother is another wholly socially unacceptable gem of a character trait. I am a terrible, 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 terrible housekeeper. Oh, don't get me wrong, I love a clean house. I love a sparkly floor or a clean shower thing you put the soap on. But I don't just passively dislike housekeeping, I actively hate it. The same thing that made me a good project manager and a wedding planner but hate managing my family's schedule is exactly what makes me hate cleaning. If it's an activity that has to be repeated daily or weekly or monthly with exactly the same results as the last time, oh, then you can count on it being something that I hate doing. I've made no secret of the fact that I'm a progress addict. I like to see things improve over time. But so far, I have found nothing that prevents a scalawag from eating Rice Krispies over a freshly vacuumed rug. And this is not progress. For me, this is the ultimate in stasis. Whereas I couldn't have suspected that the scheduling and planning thing would have been a problem in my marriage 23 years ago, this active, visceral hatred of all things domestic was a red flag from the beginning. I did try to put some order to it in the first few weeks of our marriage. It was the first time I realized that my need for order and my husband's need for liberty would be in conflict. We had our first real fight about a contract that I drew up. It was a carefully organized who does what on what day kind of thing, except that when it was his turn, it seemed like something didn't look too bad, and so he would say that it didn't need to be done. But since I am a rules and a structure person, I would do what I had assigned to myself on the day that it was assigned. This meant that I ended up doing everything, and it never looked too bad on his day. So he got used to me doing everything, and I just got angrier and angrier. But because it was just two of us, nothing was ever too bad. And then enter scalawags. So here is my equation. Anger plus resentment plus fatigue plus feeling invisible equals crisis. The birth of babies is an upheaval any way you look at it. I made room for them in our apartment by doing a tidying festival a la Marie Kondo. I was attracted to the idea that she made it sound like a once-in-a-lifetime activity that would give you peace in your stuff life forever. And it did a great deal to relieve some of the tension, but it didn't help with the cleaning up thing. Having half the stuff we'd had before didn't mean that the floor stayed cleaned or the dishes didn't pile up. It seemed that one tiny baby had 3 times as much laundry as 2 normal-sized adults. And somehow, because I was the structure and the rules person in the family, I had trained my indulgent husband to believe that all these thankless, hateful things should end up on my plate. My motto has always been, if something pisses you off, do something about it. And so I did. But I often do it with a lot of resentment. Enter postpartum depression. Enter a crisis of identity. Enter a new season of wanting to be seen as a woman and not just a roommate. And I had a crisis. A big, ugly, tear down the walls crisis. If any of us survived, it is thanks to Dana K. White and her media empire, which includes a blog and a podcast called A Slob Comes Clean. And she wrote a number of excellent books, which I highly recommend. I wish I could remember how I discovered her podcast, but it did save my family. At one point, in what she calls her deslobification process, she said that she had to stop treating her home like a project and start learning to do the basic things to keep it under control. She had a podcast episode where she talked about significant others and family members and how the only thing we can do to get their buy-in is to set the example. Her first eye-opening lesson was to simply do the dishes. so I started doing the dishes after every meal. There is one benefit to doing this, and I'm going to shamefully admit it right here. By doing the dishes after every meal, drying them and putting them away, it gave me an excuse to let my husband deal with the children. I was off the hook for as long as it took for those dishes to be completely done. As weird as this sounds, doing the dishes, which we do by hand because we don't have a dishwasher, became a brief moment of me time, something I almost came to look forward to. A few weeks ago, I got some pushback from a listener about something I've been saying in the podcast, and it wasn't a criticism per se, but you know me. Once I start overthinking something, I can't let it go. The listener's sticking point was that she doesn't like it when I say we should treat ourselves like an honored guest in our home. She said, with legitimate concern, "It sounds like you're saying be selfish, but in the same breath, you praise the courageous and selfless people in Ukraine. Pick your lane." Well, first off, I had many second thoughts before I ever waded into anything about my thoughts on what's happening in Ukraine, and I will stay away from these topics in the future. However, I stand firmly by my admiration of their selflessness, and my heart breaks for what they're experiencing, and I pray that it will all end very soon. That said, I am concerned that I would have portrayed the idea of treating ourselves like an honored guest as being selfish. If that's what this listener heard, then I need to rethink what that means. Do I really mean be selfish? Is treating ourselves like an honored guest in our home being selfish? Well, when I picture being selfish, the first thing I imagine is when I'm standing in front of what is left of my birthday cake after everyone has had a piece, and I think, I am saving the rest of this for me, and nobody better try to sneak a piece. Oh, you don't ever have those thoughts? You're a better person than I am. Having that selfish thought doesn't mean that I won't share my birthday cake. It just means that in that moment, I want it all for me. Selfishness is a weird, instinctive way our hearts have of telling us, I like this, and I want as much of it as I can possibly have. Selfishness is immature and poorly thought out. It is usually something that happens to someone else's perceived detriment. In the birthday cake example, the desired result of my selfishness is that no one else get any birthday cake. Selfishness is unintentional most of the time, meaning that we don't have to give it a ton of thought. I don't really have to try very hard to be selfish. It comes pretty darn naturally to me, thank you very much. It is in this way that I would distinguish it from treating myself as an honored guest. It does not come naturally to me to treat myself as an honored guest. Somewhere along the line in our relationships with others, as parents, as employees, as spouses, as friends, we come to make a difference between people who are worthy of the good dishes and people who aren't. People who we set up the dining room table for and those who can sit with us at the kitchen table. People who we will change the kitchen towel for and people we won't. Many years ago, prior to having children, my husband and I hosted someone in our apartment who was thinking about moving to our city. It was very much in my best interest that this person like it here, because we would be working together. I do not have the gift of hospitality. I cannot say that enough. I wouldn't go so far as to say I dread having people in my home, but it's the pressure that I put on myself to prepare for having people that I dread. I made a 5-page checklist of preparations that I needed to make for that person to stay in our apartment. Is that overkill? Why, yes, it was. But it was that important to me, and I am that bad at it. When I say that I need to treat myself as an honored guest in my home, I am thinking specifically about that. How with every single little thing I would think, I hope she never finds out that it isn't always like this. It's about how I got out the good towels, how hard I scrubbed the shower, about how I scoured the light switches for fingerprints, how I took down the curtains to wash them, how I washed the windows inside and out, how I cleaned the baseboards and moved all the furniture to vacuum. It was obsessive. It felt obsessive. It was about how, when I finally was done with my checklist, how badly I wished I had done this sooner because of how wonderful it looked and it felt. Why don't I do this more often? That was the first time I had the inkling that it would be really, really nice to be an honored guest in my own home. Wouldn't it be nice to use the good towels? Wouldn't it be nice to have clean windows more often? Wouldn't it be nice for the shower to sparkle? Wouldn't it be nice to have the table set nicely for every meal? When I say that we need to treat ourselves as an honored guest, I don't mean we need to work ourselves to the bone every single day so that everything is always guest-ready and perfect. I do mean to do the small things that would make a difference and bring us little beads of joy to put on the necklace of our lives. Case in point, one small thing that I absolutely adore is slipping into fresh sheets at bedtime. I do not love the process of changing the sheets on my bed. I do not love washing and the subsequent hanging out to dry. But I get immeasurable joy from sliding between fresh sheets at bedtime. When it comes the day that I have written on my calendar that I am to change the sheets, I often see the words and think, oh, I hate changing the sheets. Because the first thing I think of is the wrestling match that I'm going to have with the fitted sheet. First, to get it onto the laundry line to dry, and then second, the rematch that we are going to have to fold it and put it back in the drawer. But if I can get into the mindset of treating myself like an honored guest, then I can imagine what it will feel like at bedtime, when the wrestling matches will have been forgotten about, and I slip my little feet down into the bed between crisp, clean, smooth sheets. That feeling right there, that anticipation is enough to make me strip the bed and to get started. Treating ourselves like an honored guest is not a blank check to behave selfishly, but it is in part to consider how doing the things we need to do anyway can bring us future joy, and to minimize our thoughts about how annoying those things are to do in the present. I often say, life is short, wear the pretty clothes. Well, I'd like to add, life is short, use the good towels, and life is short, enjoy the clean sheets. We shouldn't be saving things up for special occasions, because the special occasions we think we're saving things up for are so unbelievably rare. There is so much joy in treating life as a special occasion that we've been saving up for. There is so much potential for joy when we treat ourselves as an honored guest. It is an unlimited treasure chest of ways, big and small, to show ourselves love. I do not believe that this desire to bring delight and joy into our lives is selfish. For it to be selfish would mean that it is to someone else's detriment, and that is not the case. If anything, when there's more delight and joy and wonder in our lives, we are better equipped to share our lives with others.
Elle me fait bondir et vibrer, crier. Elle me donne envie de chanter, danser. Elle pousse à agir, donner, partager. Et tout simplement de sourire, aimer.
When I have done something simple as changing my own sheets, it makes me want my little boys to experience the same tiny pleasure of slipping into clean sheets. In this way, when done with first and foremost the attitude of doing something out of concern for myself, in this case changing my sheets, it makes it possible to do a very, very basic household chore out of a place of love and delight for my little boys. Treating ourselves as an honored guest is not selfish. It is a first step to transforming how we view our current circumstances. It is the difference between buckling down and disciplining myself to change everyone's sheets. And I can't wait for the boys to get into bed tonight and see how awesome it feels to snuggle down in clean sheets. Do you see the difference? It starts with doing little things for ourselves, viewing little moments as opportunities to celebrate. Yes, those little things might look selfish at first, but they have so much revolutionary potential that we must not despise them. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. So now let's look at this example in terms of that gorgeous Venn diagram. For one, it is very, very good for my mental health to have tiny moments of joy to fill my day with. If something as small as fresh sheets every week or so can create one of those tiny moments, then by doing this one small housekeeping task, I'm doing something good for my mental health. In the same way, when it comes to the parenting circle on my Venn diagram, that one overarching golden rule that I like to live by as a parent, that is doing for others as I would want done for me, well, changing the sheets for my kids is a way to live that out. There are two more circles that these housekeeping tasks touch. Those are the circles of habits and routine and contentment. For example, doing the dishes after every single meal becomes a habit, a routine, and that is also, incidentally, really good for my mental health. Or contentment. We're going to see in a few weeks that for me, contentment is about keeping our possessions to a minimum. And doing the dishes after every single meal means that we need fewer dishes. Do I fail? Why, yes, of course I fail. I fail all the time. But in my Ideal Life exercises, doing them every single morning and returning to this topic every few weeks, it means that I never get too far out of control. Not so far out of control that I can't come back with a few hours of concentrated effort. Layla Kelly is here. Layla is your wicked stepsister, but she is also a death doula. A death doula is a professional who helps people walk through end-of-life issues. This means that she has an intriguing vault of curiosities about death rituals and burial methods from around the world. She has pulled one out for us this week that you and I can be quite grateful we don't have to get down and dirty with. Because yes, indeed, this weird and wonderful story is about cleaning. Layla, the floor is yours.
Clean, sparkling, unblemished, pristine. We love clean. Clean makes us feel good. Imagine the comfort and satisfaction of crawling between fresh, clean sheets. We love that feeling. We love clean. So get out your scrub brushes, get a bucket of water, a bucket of vinegar, some trash bags, a clean white sheet, and let's get to it. A sheet? Yes, a sheet, like the one on your bed. I'll explain later. Let me back up a little bit before we get too deep. What I have to say about cleaning may not be your cup of tea. I'm going to present cleaning from a very wicked, very deathy angle. So if you're not up for it, feel free to fast forward right through me and head back to Lily. It's not a problem. But if you're sticking with me, let's go to Greece. I have never visited Greece, but it is very high on my list of places to see. I imagine blue sea and sky dotted with crisp, white, sun-bleached buildings and walls. Even the stones in the cemetery glow white from the salty air. The cemetery. That's where we're headed with our cleaning supplies. So grab your things. Greece is a country in crisis. There is an economic crisis putting pressure on family finances and a land crisis. Specifically, there's not enough land for the dead. Greece is heavily influenced by the powerful Greek Orthodox Church, which teaches that a body that has been cremated cannot be resurrected. Therefore, crematoriums are scarce in Greece. Scarce as in there's one. There's one crematorium in all of Greece. Some families will have the bodies of loved ones sent to neighboring Bulgaria for cremation, but that simply isn't an option for most people. So here we are. We are in Greece. Oh, and Grandma has died. What are we going to do? Have a funeral, of course. We get Grandma dressed in her favorite dress, thick wool socks to warm her feet. She's placed in the coffin and buried with her head facing west, to the setting sun, the place where the day ends. We decorate her grave with flowers and a photo or two, and then we go about our business. That is how death works. However, we go back 3 years later. Our lease is up. Lease? Yes, we only leased Grandma's plot for 3 years. And each year after, the rent is going to steadily increase. And remember, we're just trying to keep afloat through an economic crisis. We really can't afford this expense. So, you, me, and a couple of very supportive friends, we all head to the cemetery with our cleaning supplies. Wait, what? Yeah, we're going to go dig up Grandma. As we head to the cemetery, Well-wishing locals tell us that they hope Grandma has melted, by which they mean decomposed substantially. We thank them for their positive thoughts and continue on to meet our grave digger, or grave undigger, as the case may be. He digs for a couple of hours while we explore the cemetery. Eventually, he signals that he needs our help. You grab a trash bag while I lay out our clean white sheet. The digger starts throwing pieces of coffin debris and scraps of muddy, torn fabric into your bag. You step aside, and I am handed a skull. I use my brushes to remove the earth from the eye sockets, and then I lay it on the sheet. We do our work systematically. The gravedigger continues unearthing bones, moving from head to feet. You collect debris. I remove dirt from bones. Finally, after we've collected the long bones of the leg, our digger brings up 2 wool socks. It turns out those socks weren't for keeping Grandma's feet warm. Wool doesn't break down very easily. Those heavy socks, they hold all of the small bones of the feet. So we shake those out onto our sheet. Our gravedigger refills the grave and he leaves. He has about 15 exhumations to do this week. He just can't stick around. You, me, and our friends, we begin scrubbing and cleaning the bones with water and vinegar, placing each cleansed bone into a box. Just a cardboard box, nothing fancy. We gather our supplies and our box of Grandma, and we head to the ossuary. Maybe you're imagining one of those amazing ossuaries of Europe, like the Paris Catacombs or the Sedlik Ossuary in the Czech Republic. No, we're not headed to an artful ossuary. This ossuary is more like a shed. Inside, there are utilitarian metal shelves. Grandma is going to be placed unceremoniously on a shelf, very much in a place that echoes a police evidence locker. Is that the end? No, not for many. Many of these former people will be moved one last time to something called, and this is just horrible, it's called a digestive pit. It's a mass underground grave. No ceremony, the gravedigger will simply toss the remains into the pit with thousands of others. So ends our trip to Greece. How do you feel about this process? Do you find the idea of exhuming and cleaning the bones of your loved ones to be appalling? And bear in mind, it's not always the very old who die. A family could be moving through this same process with a much younger loved one. I realize that this is a lot to take in. So why do I bring up cleaning bones and exhumations? There's a crisis, and it's not just in Greece. Population increase, environmental strain, lack of open space, and the price tag associated with traditional funerals are all things that we have to consider when it comes to our own death choices. I will most definitely share more about alternative body disposition options in an upcoming episode. In the meantime, thank you so much for sticking with me through my very wicked twist on cleaning. You may go back to Lily now.
Thank you, Liella, for that intriguing story. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to more of Liella's work. She always has fascinating and intriguing stories, plus down-to-earth, helpful advice. We are just so thankful that she's part of our show. Let's take a minute to review the 4 questions that we ask for each of our ideal life categories. Number 1, what is working? What is going well in your housekeeping right now? Have you undertaken your spring cleaning or a decluttering project? Good for you. So number 2, what isn't working? Go ahead and be honest. There might be more than one thing that's not working, and that's okay. Just state the facts. Number 3, what do you need to think about? I, for one, am intrigued about something I heard about that's called Swedish death cleaning. It sounds like it might be right up Liella's alley, don't you think? And number 4, what one small thing can you do today to get you closer to your ideal life in your housekeeping? Change the sheets, put the laundry away, Take that junk that's been filling up your garage for far too long to the dump. Just do one little thing that you might do if you had an honored guest coming to visit. Only this time, you are the honored guest. I've said this before, but seeking to live your ideal life is an act of self-love. Treating yourself as an honored guest is an act of self-love. Taking a few minutes each day to consider these 4 questions is a way to pursue your ideal life. You are an amazing human being, and you deserve more little beads of joy on the necklace of your life. Find those little things that would make you feel like an honored guest in your home and enjoy them. This world needs more joy, and you can start by providing it for yourself. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you for subscribing and for sharing. I'm really honored, really, really honored for the way that you have given us such a warm welcome. A great big thank you to 7 Productions here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie as the intro and outro to the show. Also, thanks to Matt Kugler who sang it and to Claude Egwe who wrote it. This is your fairy godmother signing off. Just remember, it is never too late to start singing with your feet.